G'day, welcome everybody. My name is Gregory Phillips. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Kulin peoples whose land we're meeting on, and all of the tribes and language groups, clans and language groups within the Kulin Nation. We're very privileged to be joined by three experts tonight from the Victorian Aboriginal Corporation for Languages, Paul Paton, Mandy Nicholson and Joel Wright. It's great to see a full house. Thanks for coming along. We're going to have hear from each of our panel speakers for about 15 minutes each, and then we'll have an open mic question and answer and free-flowing discussion. So I hope you brought all of your passions and interests and questions. Tonight is we're on the eve of the Victorian Indigenous Literary Festival, Black and Bright. It's an initiative of the Wheeler Centre, and tonight is in partnership with VAC, or Victorian Aboriginal Corporation for Languages. So we're really excited that the Wheeler Centre are partnering in this way for such an important issue. Media resources, if you want to know about Black and Bright, it's just BLAK, blackandbright.com.au, and it's got all the events there. On Twitter, for those Twitterites out there, at Black and Bright, again just with a K. And the hashtag is hashtag BlackBright16, and that'll do for now. Are you all excited to be here? Very good, very exciting for a full house. Paul Paton, tell us about your work and the amazing things that your corporation does.
Wow. I'd like to start by introducing myself in language. So that in my language is Womaninji, Ngatu Makta, Paul Paton, Nadu Ganai, Nadu Manero, Nadu Tanganai, Wurundjeri and Bunurong Work. So that's just me, and where I'm from the Gunai people of East Gippsland and the Monero people of the high plains around Mount Kosciuszko. And I'm just acknowledging Wurundjeri country and Bunurong country as well, and all the language groups of the Kulin Nation. And I wanted to just acknowledge you as a group. It's so great to see so many people here, and here to hear about Aboriginal languages, which is, for us, we live and breathe Aboriginal languages and our culture, and we're striving to bring back our languages to everyday use. And language is, for us, it's our identity. It's who we are, and it's how we identify ourselves. And I think everyone can associate their language with their identity. You think about Australian English, even. English. We speak a version of English. Australian English, there's American English, British English, and that's how we identify ourselves. That's how we are identified as the language that we speak. And it's a way that we express our culture. You hear about Australian culture and the Australian vernacular, and the same goes for Aboriginal languages. It's how we express ourselves. It's how we express our stories, and how we connect to the country, and how we understand our systems within marriage, within kinship, seasons. All those types of things are contained and expressed through our language. So to not be able to speak our languages fluently as they were spoken prior to colonisation, then the ways of expressing our culture are somewhat, I guess, diminished, where we're using another language to express our culture. So it's not expressing it to its full potential. And as far as analogies of the language landscape, there's 38 languages in Victoria that have been identified, and over 250 languages in the country. And you can liken Aboriginal languages. Anyone who's been to Europe, you think about the makeup of languages. A whole lot of languages. You cross the Alps there from Italy, and you go into Germany. Same sort of thing. You might head over the dividing range, and you go from Gunai country over to Dudoroa country or something like that, and the language is different, and the connections, the stories, the landscape is identified and it's contained within the land, and the land speaks through the places. You think about place names. Everyone here would be speaking language through place names. Places like Dandenong and Geelong, the Mullumbulum Tunnel, all those types of places, they're Aboriginal names. There's about 3,500 Aboriginal names within just Victoria alone that either have an Aboriginal meaning or we know what their Aboriginal meaning is. And places, Aboriginal place names tell a story. They tell a connection to that place, and they tell us about how to live on the land, how to access water, where to go to the next food resource, and those types of things are all within those stories and within those places, and they're connected. And that really helps us to engage and live in that environment.
So we're actually pretty dislocated from our landscape, aren't we? I mean, all of us living here now, Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people.
That's right.
If we don't know the language that comes from here, in a way, what you're saying is we're actually dislocated from where we live. Yeah,
there's this another layer that's been placed on top of the landscape, and the landscape has been impacted through diversions of creeks and river systems and all those types of areas and of language and of those stories and those connections have been somewhat displaced. It's about bringing back that knowledge, and fortunately, we've got access to some resources. Fortunately, collectors and linguists over the years actually collected some of our languages, and we're able to utilise those resources to rebuild language, and that's really what it is. Where I heard someone use the term as a language engineer. That's awesome. That's really what we're doing. We're re-engineering our languages into a modern context, and there's so many ways that we can actually do it. And for us as an organisation, we take a very sort of broad approach to that, and we have to address those access to resources. So those resources are scattered all over the place in institutions, and we've managed to collect those resources so that there are community accessible resources.
That's painstaking work.
A lot of work, and we've done the hard yards. We've spent the time collecting those records for over 20 years, and that hard work is now paying off in that we're able to produce resources such as dictionaries and CD-ROMs, apps, all those types of things are now coming to the fore. We're able to actually bring those resources into the community to help teach the language to those people, and it's really important that we teach the community in a variety of settings. The community want to relearn the language, but they also want the broader community to embrace language and understand about the diversity of languages. And that diversity, like I said before, is there's 38 different languages, 11 different language families within Victoria. So our language family is a related language. So as before we mentioned the Kulin Nation. So the Kulin Nation is made up of 5 language groups, and they're in linguistic terms they're related. So their language is very similar. So 11 language families, and that's something that can be a strength in language revival, because where there are gaps in the language, the relatedness of language enables you to actually perhaps borrow words and bring them across into your language.
Can I just ask, so of those 11 language families you're talking about, do the language families roughly translate to a different nation, for example? So Kulin Nation being one family of languages, like one of the other families, does that sort of roughly translate to the nation in that area as well, or is it a bit?
I guess not all language groups sort of collectively identify as a nation.
Sure.
I think in Joel's group, I think you might hear the word Gunditjmara Nation, but some of the other groups may identify, such as we've got the Kulin Nation here, and there's also another Kulin Nation, which is the Western Kulin Nation, which is along the northwest, up along the Murray River, that area there.
Like which mobs does that include?
Places like Yorta Yorta, Wamba Wamba, Latchi Latchi, all those mobs up along the river. They don't actually identify collectively as the Western Kulin nation.
Right.
It's fairly unique in a sense of the Eastern Kulin as identifying as a Kulin nation around Victoria, and then there's all other scattered areas around the state, adding up to those 11 families. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's a real challenge to revive language, but it's also a very enriching process. And we've been having a workshop today and tomorrow with some of those language champions within the community who are looking to extend their knowledge and learn from each other and share those experiences. So it's really important to actually create those opportunities and
about how to rebuild
and some of those skills and not reinvent the wheel as well, because a lot of people have actually done that work and can share that knowledge. So it's we're limited by the resources that we have. So to be able to spread that knowledge, enables us to stretch those resources even further. There's many different ways and approaches that we've taken from doing research and collecting and training people to understand those resources. Some of those resources are written in highly linguistic language, so they're hard to interpret. So you really need some of that knowledge to be able to unlock what's being written about your language. Another approach we have is around education. So we've worked really hard over the last 20 years to actually establish curriculum and to enable the teaching of language in schools, and that's really important, so that there is a framework there that people can actually tap into. Schools and communities can tap into that framework, and if they want to go down that path of education, that work's already done and established. So it's really about building up capacity within the community now to allow people to become the teachers of language. And so that's our next big challenge, is to increase the number of language teachers in so that they can then take that knowledge out into the community and into the schools.
How long's the project been underway? The project as in, your organisation and this kind of work.
Yeah, the organisation is, we're in our 22nd year, so a fairly small organisation, and we work with communities and it's really about understanding what the needs of the community are and what the priorities are, because the priorities are different amongst communities, and the level of resources are different, because, for example, some languages, there's, I think Joel was saying, there's 4,500 words in his database, and then and there are other examples of languages that might only be lucky to get 100 words. So it depends on what resources are available, affects your capacity to actually rebuild the language. And one of the language workers today said, he's only started in July last year, and he started out with 20 words, and already in 6 months he's gone up to 90 words that he's actually found by trailing through those resources. So he's actually been able to expand his language within a very short time frame. So that was just fantastic to hear those types of results. Yeah.
Awesome. So you're covering the whole gamut of work, from working with communities and rebuilding confidence and pride, I imagine.
Absolutely.
To right through to then actually doing the research, finding the material, creating resources, training other people. That's right, yeah. Training other people and educating and advocating for languages, educating the community about the diversity of languages, going out to universities and speaking to linguistic students, and so that when they're working with communities, they understand the issues. So speaking to teachers, really important that teachers get that knowledge around Aboriginal languages and culture, so that they're able to, when it's their time to be in the classroom, they have some of that groundwork. Speaking to speech pathology students who are actually, may have students who come to them when their teacher says,
they're not speaking proper English, and they're speaking, but they actually are. They're speaking a form of recognised Aboriginal English, and not to put them into a remedial program because they're speaking a different form of English. So really about educating the broader community about what the issues are, what the challenges are. Challenges, are resources. Challenges are people and funding. Funding to support the work. The work we've done over the last 20 years has really expanded, and the demand is really sort of stretching the resources that are available, because everyone wants to. They see someone down the road. We just launched an app on Monday up in Swan Hill. The kids up there, they produced a language app, and everyone now wants an app. So
for their own local language,
yeah,
or for the whole state.
For their own language.
Right. Awesome.
Yeah.
Good.
So the words are getting out. Yeah. People are seeing what others are doing, and they want to go down that same path. So it's really good to see that people want to do that. But we really need to find ways to support them in what they want to do.
My experience, there's a lot of narrative and discussion that young Aboriginal people are disengaged from the system, and they don't care about education, and they don't look after their health, and blah, blah, blah. It's all this negative stuff. Yeah. But actually what you're saying is that if you give them something that they actually relate to, their language, they sound hungry.
That's right. Yeah. The youth of today, we're hearing from those conversations and those forums that the youth are having, that they want more of their culture, they want more of their language, and to instill language and culture within themselves. It builds their identity, and it strengthens who they are, and it makes them more resilient to the rest of the world, and that helps them be more successful, because they're confident in who they are. They have that pathway, and they're stronger individuals. So and there's plenty of examples of young people who've found language, found culture, and made pathways to success.
Awesome. Very important work. That's probably a great segue then, Mandy. I think you're going to hopefully tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing at the community level and how you undertake it.
Bladu Nyan Wanat, Naranik Mandy, Wurundjeri Willamik, Wurundjeri Balakut, Nyungodjan Liwik Bulok, Nyungodjan Kiripik, Nyungodjan Giran Nugulik, Nyungodjan Gangan Nugulik, Nyungodjan Lalaba Gugung Bulok. So thank you. My name is Mandy Nicholson. My people of the Wurundjeri Willam, and within Wurundjeri Willam, I'm the Wurundjeri Balak Patroline. So I just thanked you as my friends. I thanked my ancestors. I thanked all my grandmothers and grandfathers. And I thanked my family, and I thanked all my uncles and aunties, because I'm really glad to be invited to talk at an event like this, because there's so much interest in Victorian Aboriginal languages and Aboriginal languages in general. So I thought I didn't prepare anything to talk about, because I can talk quite a bit. So what I suppose I'll focus on is my journey. I grew up in Hillsville. I was born in Hillsville. My grandmother was born in a place called Corrandirk, under a big pine tree, which is still there. And every time I go to Hillsville, I always go and visit the Corrandirk cemetery there, to pay homage to my ancestors and my family there. And I lived in Hillsville until I was about 12 years old. My father's Aboriginal and my mum's German. And then we moved to Gippsland. And I think that was a turning point in my life, because in Hillsville there was quite a high number of Aboriginal students and kids generally in the town. So we weren't targeted as much as being different to everybody else. So it wasn't too bad in primary school, but then I went to high school in Gippsland, and me and my brother were the only Aboriginal students there. So I kind of hid in a little shell, and I never really opened up to anyone about who I was. I was a very shy person. I would not imagine I'd be in front of people talking publicly ever. I thought that'd just be the end of my life. So I've come a long way from that, but growing up in my home, I've come to learn that the elders and the generation before me, they don't have the same opportunities as us in this generation to really embrace culture and learn and teach language, because I know that my stories that Mum and Dad have told me about when they were dating as teenagers, as most of you know, if they go out on a date, my mum was allowed in the restaurant, my dad had to wait at the front. So that was the era that they grew up in. So I grew up in a house full of love and support and all the good things, but culture was lacking there because my dad wasn't taught himself because of all the policies that came in to force that you weren't allowed to speak language, you weren't allowed to practice any culture, anything like that. And I remember my grandmother saying that she remembers her mother feeding the wild blacks outside Corandurk, and if she got caught feeding them, her food would be taken off her family, but she said, stuff it, I'm going to feed these people. So I think we've all got a fire in our belly because of these people in our family that fought the hard fight to make it easier for us today. So what we can focus on now in this generation is really researching as much as we can about our language and our culture, because language and culture is basically the same thing. You can't have one without the other. And that's exactly what I did. I grew up in a high school that was a really redneck school. Maybe I should mention it, maybe I shouldn't.
Go on.
Urban North Secondary College. But coming from that school...
There's challenges in lots of schools, yeah.
Well, it was a potato growing area, so we were slightly different to everybody else, and we weren't potato farmers. So we got targeted, me and my brother, and we ended up hating school. We hated the environment of the school, the memories of school, and I think, I'm not claustrophobic, but I think one of my worst memories of going to this school was getting on the bus. Because I was a really quiet person, I'd often get teased on the bus and there was no escape on the bus. So I think coming from that sort of background, I didn't go out in front of the world and say, hi everybody, I'm Aboriginal. I just kept everything to myself. I really shut down from the world, I suppose, and just sort of lived day to day. But then something changed again. So I've had all these different moments in my life. And after I finished high school, I went to Monash University in Churchill, and they had an Aboriginal Studies course. And I thought, oh, I'm really shy. I don't really want to go to university. I didn't want to. But me and my brother both went. And then my dad worked at the SEC for 30 plus years, and he was retrenched. He had nowhere to go. So we all went as a family to do this course. And I was like, oh, I'm going to a course with my dad. Oh. And he's like, oh, I'm here to make you pass, Mandy. So I look back now and I just love Dad to death, and I just so love him for that support that he gave me back then, being an insecure little girl. So we went through the course, we finished the course, and I think that major changing point in my life was my first assignment was to write a biography about my life and who I was. So I've always known who I was. I always knew my connections, but writing it down on a piece of paper made something snap. I realised, what am I ashamed of? What am I shy? Why am I so shy? This is something beautiful, my Aboriginal culture, to embrace and to be out there loud and proud, because the thing that changed and allowed me to think that way was all the staff there were either Aboriginal or really supportive of Aboriginal people. So Auntie Doris is in the crowd somewhere. She was one of my teachers, should I say how long ago? 20 plus years ago now. So it was quite a turnaround. I went to uni, had kids, got jobs all through my life, and then come to VACL, and I sort of came back to Auntie Doris. So that course really opened up me from that shell, and I haven't looked back. I hit the ground running, and after I finished that course, because as part of that course we did a little bit of Bundjalung language. Jingawatawita, that's all I remember now. Bugunyagala. Oh, see, as soon as you start talking it, you remember. That's how are you, I'm good. And that opened my eyes. Oh my God, there's so much out there that I don't know. I want to learn as much as I can, and language was a really big interest of mine. So my journey deviated here, there and everywhere. I've got 2 daughters that are basically mini-me's. They're following every step I take, and got the attitude of me sometimes too, but there's nothing to complain about. So I did the university course, and then I worked at a place called Galena Beak Living Cultural Centre. And sometimes, very rarely, I answer the phone. Good afternoon, Galena Beak Living Cultural Centre. It's still in my head. It's such a long welcome. And I remember finding this book from Barry Blake, and I thought it was the whole book full of my language. So I photocopied 2 copies, bound them, and put them into folders. I go, awesome, I'm going to teach people, I'm going to learn my language myself. And then I realised that it was only a chapter in the book, but it was probably, I don't know, about 40 pages in that book, and I had no idea how to read it. The front section had all this grammar stuff. I went straight over my head, didn't understand a word of it, but I saw the words in there, and I read them to myself, and I wrote them down. I put them in an education room up top because I was an education officer, and I took tours and things like that, as you do at a cultural centre. And I remember reading the words. Now I look back and go, wow, I really knew nothing, but I was trying, so good on me for the effort. But I was reading all the words in an English way. And my language journey now has taught me that a lot of language words do not sound any way similar to English. They're sounds that aren't even heard in English. So I remember reading them incorrectly. I remember writing the letters after the words as part of the word, but those letters at the end of the word were the actual people that recorded the word down. So I was completely off track. So I worked there for a few years, and then I decided maybe I need a university degree. So I went and did archaeology. So everything to do with cultural heritage and human behaviour. I've always been interested in geology and all that kind of stuff. And then I got my honours, handed it in, and then 2 weeks later a job came up at VACL. And I had a choice. What do I want to do? And as I said, through all that journey, I've always been, that spark has always been there, that I really want to learn my language. And whoa, I did not know how much language would give me. It's really opened up so many doors in my mind, in myself, who I am, my community. It's unbelievable how language can do that to you, and how much pride language can give to your community. And other communities that are involved. It's just an awesome feeling to know that I have access to my resources for my language, but I also feel I've got to look after myself too, because there's often in Aboriginal communities you've got one language leader that's sort of leading the way, and you've got to look out for burnout, because you're so enthusiastic. All language workers have a passion, and passion always makes you tired, so you've got to always really look after yourself. And since I started at VACL, I tried my best, and I still wanted to learn. So our language, Woiwurrung, does not have any dictionary, phrasebook or anything published except for that chapter in the Blake book, and he was a linguist, I suppose, and he gathered all these records from the 1800s and put them into one chapter in a book, and he compared all the spellings, and he's created his own spelling system. The problem with that is I've never seen this Blake man. I don't think he's ever communicated, or maybe communicated, but he's never come into Wurundjeri, the office, and said, hey, let's work together with something here. So it's community driven. People that want to learn language and teach language get out there and do it themselves. So since I've started at VACL, we don't have, like I said, a dictionary or anything like that, but we've got grammar written for linguists, which is a problem in Aboriginal languages. It's all written in linguistic terms. So a neighbouring language, Tanarong, they created a community dictionary, and in the front it was a godsend to me because it was all the grammar written in plain English. Like, this word means 2 people excluding you, or those 2 people over there, or just really plain, easy to understand. And another big light bulb went off in my head. And since then I've been able to translate anything. I can do it a lot quicker now than when I first tried. And so songs, dances, stories, anything you throw at me, except not happy birthday, I've done happy birthday, except Merry Christmas and Happy Easter. We've had requests to translate that. Sometimes you have to make up new words that relate to something.
Christ.
Yeah. So it's
not exactly related to here.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So it's really funny sometimes the requests that we get.
Yeah.
And I think what I do with VACL has enabled me to go out to my community, and I'm really pleased to say that the Wurundjeri Council have just signed off an MOU with VACL to help create these resources that we are lacking and have them community driven and written so the Wurundjeri community can be re-empowered with their own knowledge. The language that has been sleeping, it's not dead, because if you're dead you can't ever wake up. So languages in Victoria are sleeping. They're reawakening with a boom at the moment, and we are able to put language in every aspect of life, really. So it's a really exciting time now to get language out there and get it active. And I think the most important part of it is we're using it in context. We're using it at home. We're saying, burned up button mungip, good night daughter. We've got to use language in a way that is usable rather than single words or out of context from the situation that you're in. You can learn a line to say, hello, my name is, or welcome everybody, or you can adapt that to say, my name is, welcome you too. You know, just change word endings. And once you learn that grammar, you can adapt. And my brain doesn't usually remember things too well, but I find myself remembering a lot of language on the spot. Sometimes I still have to think or look up some words or grammar endings or whatever to help me along the way. But I just think it's just opened so many doors in my mind to complete my identity as an Aboriginal woman.
What a beautiful story. Absolutely. You just really illustrated the personal and the emotional journey that goes with not only learning a language. It's not like you're just sort of learning Spanish or some language from somewhere else, but really it sounds to me like it's a process of uncovering history and recovering from genocide.
Yeah, it's very healing.
Coming back to who you are, your
Yeah.
identity.
Yep.
Beautiful. Thank you. So Joel, how do we move forward? What are the challenges here? What do we need to do?
Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the country where we are today, the Wurundjeri people, Bunurong people, and pay my respects to their elders. And I too will introduce myself in Gunish Mara language. Nyatun Nyat Linyung, Jo Wright, Pa Gunish Mara, Apan. And I'm the coordinator for the Laka Gunditj language program, which is holistically within Gunditj Jamara country, and that extends roughly from, say, Lorne on the coast right through to the South Australian border and inland by about 150 to 200 kilometres. The Gunditj Mara language family is a very distinct language group in comparison to the other language families of Victoria. Our language group has around about 11% common vocabulary, which makes it quite distinct from the other language, particularly the Kulin Nation language families. And within our language family, we have 9 separate language groups. So I service all of those groups as best I can, one person on the ground. Fortunately, the linguistic analysis of the languages relationships is as high as 76%. So it makes my work feasible in being able to at least revive language on a regional type basis as opposed to just working with one particular community. The other interesting thing is our languages have more relationship with the South Australian language family, the Boandik language. So our language relationship there is around 40, 45, 50%. So it's much higher going west than it is, going east. I started doing the language program formally in 2009, but certainly I was involved in language work, if you like, promoting language, Aboriginal language, much earlier than that. I suppose it goes back to when I was doing my trade as a builder in Sydney. After schools program was to learn an Aboriginal language, which was Pitjantjatjara, and it's one of the first languages that I came into contact with in my teens. And then...
Which is Uluru, around central?
Well, yeah, Central Australia, really. And, I mean, it was fantastic for me to actually, back in those days, in the mid-70s, to be actually, learning an Aboriginal language. And given that there was still a lot of, how we say, resistance to recognising Aboriginality in any way, shape or form. So they were the really early inspirations for my motivation in continuing language work. Worked in the ABC from the 90s right through the 90s as a producer and for the national Aboriginal program Speaking Out, and quite regularly used to produce segments of Aboriginal creation stories, dreaming stories from around the country and in language, as recorded by the traditional owners who were generous enough to share their culture with us, and obviously, work with them in terms of getting the correct translations and appropriate sound effects and things like that. So, and then I think it was in 2000 that I was the first executive officer, which is Paul's role for VACL. At that time there was, I think, 2 people working in the organisation, and all of the language records for the state, for all of the 38 language groups in Victoria, were all on a card file system. So they were very early days, and it was very difficult to really try to inspire Aboriginal communities across the state to embrace Aboriginal language revival per se. We were fortunate enough to during that time to procure some badly needed resources and funding to the point where we were able to establish a tailor-made computer database system for us to then be able to more effectively conduct our linguistic research around reclaiming languages, and to obviously digitise all of our records and secure our language resources and holdings. From that point on, really VACL and language programs under the management of Paul and the board of directors of VACL has really gone gangbusters. We've started to see some significant developments within the whole language program entity, if you like, and one of the most significant, I thought, and we have mentioned, Paul mentioned it earlier, was the development of an Aboriginal language studies curriculum. We were constantly being knocked back from schools when we wanted to introduce some language studies in as part of their cultural education activities and programs. Oh, you can't do that, you don't have a formally recognised curriculum. So, all right, so we went in to bat on that one. We worked heavily with the Victorian Curriculum and Assessment Authority to develop the curriculum, and it was finally endorsed in 2009, I think, for schools from P to 10, which I think it's F to 10 now, and also produced a curriculum for VCE level. So once we had those documents fleshed out, and the most important element within those documents is certainly the protocols, statements that are critically necessary for schools and community language programs to undertake language revival activities. We need to obviously have permission from the traditional owners to whom the language belongs. We need to have recognised experts in the language, creating a team to resource the delivery of language studies programs within the school. And once all of those frameworks were set up to support the actual expected outcomes as described within the curriculum, then we really didn't have anything stopping us from introducing language studies more formally within the school settings.
Joel, do schools come to you and request that, or do you try and encourage schools? Or, I mean, roughly how many schools?
Initially, as I say, there was severe scepticism that it was a viable program. And that was expressed by not only the schools sector, but quite a lot of, non-Indigenous linguists were also quite sceptical about the viability of being able to run language studies programs. But we were able to lobby and demonstrate, once we'd established, the computer infrastructure to be able to produce resources that could clearly demonstrate language studies in schools was holistically viable. So at the early age, no, the schools wouldn't be approaching us, but nowadays it's a different story. All of the schools are keenly interested in introducing language studies as part of the cultural education programs within their schools. One example is we really got the ball rolling in Gunish country. We're in Haywood. The Indigenous students within that Haywood Secondary College were doing a LOTE program, which is LOTE is language other than English studies, and they were studying French. The French language teacher got a job offer, which was in Japan, so she flew the coop, so to speak, and that left a hole in the language program at the Haywood Secondary College. And in discussions with the local community and with the people of the principals of the school and education department representatives, we put forward the question, well, okay, why don't we introduce the local Indigenous language under the LOTE program? And yeah, certainly, what's sort of said to them, if they don't, that's discrimination. And so they were pretty much cornered to the point where they had to consider giving this a go. So they set up a pilot program to introduce for the first time Indigenous language studies under the LOTE framework, and that was at Haywood in 2010. And it's pleasing to say and report to you all today that language studies program is still going strong today.
Awesome.
So that's a huge turnaround and certainly an example of the sort of progress that we've made in introducing languages within formal learning settings. The other work that I do, very briefly, I can see we're getting to question time, is I've worked with a lot of the primary schools in the region to produce the digital bilingual cue books. These are creation stories in Gunish language and in English. They're interactive. You can colour them in. You can record your own voice doing the narration once you become practised in learning the language dialogue for the story. And there's a whole raft of support resources on a link to a website to assist teachers to develop learning activities within the classroom to reinforce the cultural learning outcomes that are contained within the actual creation stories themselves. The other aspect of the work that I've been doing is we were successful in establishing a broader community reference group within the Warrnambool region, which has local council representatives, all of the school representatives at every level, kindergarten, primary and high school, Aboriginal community organisation representatives, and we were successful in developing a strategy training the teachers on how to introduce cultural studies, effective cultural studies and cultural programs within their school settings. And this is a 3-year project, and we're on the second stage of that project now. And basically what it is for myself to deliver professional development training to early childhood teachers on the introduction of cultural and language learning programs within their early childhood curriculum framework. It's been hugely successful. There's around 45 early childhood teachers I've trained so far, and I'm just about to start the second stage, which is targeting the council who is neighbouring Warrnambool City Council. So once one group hear about an activity going on here, the next group want it as well. And that was the same scenario with the high school, Haywood District High School, got the language studies program up. Then next thing you know, I'm being contacted by Brower College and Warrnambool Secondary College and the Catholic schools in the region, and all of the primary schools as well, wanting to have language programs introduced.
So I imagine with that comes a lot of stretched resources, and you need. What are the next steps? What's your next challenges to take this forward?
That is the real problem, Greg. The growing demand for Aboriginal language within the wider community is significantly impacting on certainly our communities and our organisational capacities to deliver. It's not a week that doesn't go by where I'm contacted by some state government agency here in Victoria wanting to get the words for healthy, strong people to name their new Aboriginal health strategy, or and a whole raft of other program initiatives and policy initiatives that are specific for Aboriginal people. All of this demand is growing and burgeoning, but the problem is that the resources of people and expertise on the ground is stagnant. There's really no continued or permanent support being provided by the state government here in Victoria towards Aboriginal language program revival, and it's seriously amiss, given that every other state and territory around Australia has a formally established Aboriginal language policy at a state and territory level, which is annually funded and a budget line item within their annual budget. So, we're doing the job that we're being requested to do by our communities. We're being inclusive by sharing our language and culture and educating the wider community about Aboriginal people, and the demand has really become quite significant, and it requires a shift, I think, in the status quo with regards to resourcing that's currently available.
Martin Foley, he's the Minister for everything actually, and is that right? Is that better? And I'm not saying we can achieve anything, but we can try and write to him and speak to him about your projects and for some sort of funding, and at least let him know a bit more about what you're doing as well. So who do we approach?
Who's the minister? Who should they write to?
Who should we write to?
Oh well, the state minister for education is James Molina. So he's the deputy premier.
Dear James, we all think there should be
minister.
more Victorian languages. Please support it.
Right.
Yeah.
What's his surname? I can look it up.
Merlino.
Molina.
Merlino.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering, as a LOAT teacher, how we can volunteer to help the organisation, or what can we do in terms of professional development to, be part of that curriculum.
Okay. Yes, we do get lots of volunteer offers, and thank you for that. There's plenty of work to do, and usually our volunteers come from a linguistic background, but volunteers with a teaching or educational background are highly, valued, I guess, in that we're trying to meet that demand. And I just wanted to sort of, I guess, comment on that demand. We've talked about the structures, and we didn't mention the ACARA framework, which is the Australian curriculum. And ACARA is the Australian Curriculum and Reporting Authority, and they released the framework for teaching Aboriginal languages in the national framework in December, just gone. And so there's this framework out there that people, that schools can take on and teach language, but we don't have the teachers, we don't have the resources, the learning is resources and those types of things. So we're sort of putting the cart before the horse, I guess, in a sense. Yeah. Oh, that's right. And also, Joel's been doing professional development for those early childhood teachers, and the question begs, why aren't they getting it at their formalised training when they're going to university? Why aren't they getting taught about languages and culture and cultural competency? They have to come to the community to get it. They should be getting it. They should be getting it from the community through that formalised training environment.
It's interesting to me you were saying that. I'm sure not all linguists, but some kind of think that it's too difficult. I heard you say that before. So
yeah, certainly that was their initial thoughts. Certainly the board of VACL can be very convincing when it needs to be, and
strategic. And
we were able to change the attitudes, which was representing pretty much a block in progress for us back in those days. So. It's pleasing to see that one of the linguists who was probably most resistant to the idea now is fully embracing of introducing language studies within the school setting. So I think certainly given that we've been able to clear the blockage, move forward and demonstrate the viability of the program, which has been successful, and now the floodgates of demand have opened, and there needs to be some sort of response to build on the success in terms of enhancing our capacity to manage the response, if you like, the demand.
Right.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Right down the back. Thank you.
I'd like to address this to the lady on the panel. Back in the 70s, as part of a linguistic degree, I did a couple of units with Barry Blake. If he's still alive, he'd have to be in his 90s, I imagine. But and some of that went over my head initially as well. But have you developed a set of basic principles? Like one of the things that I remember Barry impressing on us was that in general, the emphasis was on the first syllable in Indigenous languages, or is it to develop such a set of principles that would go across languages? Is that culturally sensitive?
I think I'm not a linguist, and I don't intend to study linguistics because I've had enough of university. But learning with our community linguist at work, Christina, she has explained it to me in a way that I can understand. And so when you use all these linguistic terms, it still goes over my head. But when I'm actually using the language in practice, I can see, well, if there was a emphasis on the first letter of the word, I only know when I'm actually saying it rather than looking at it analytically in a linguistic way. So we were learning what letter grouping sounded like, like in my language there's no real word starting in a vowel. So if I come across a word with a vowel at the start, I know that there's a sound at the beginning that has been missed, like usually the NG sound, like the ng sound. So I don't kind of look at words in that way. I just, as I'm using it in practice, I can see, well, yeah, now I can see that there is an emphasis on that or this. And I know in songs, there's 3 songs that William Barak, most of you have heard of William Barak. look at the end of Elizabeth Street, you'll see his name, his whole face on that building. So it's awesome that they did that. Thanks, Grollo. So he did 3 songs, and I can't remember the name of the guy that wrote it down, but he was a musician and he wrote all the notes down. And I can't read music at all, but just lucky our community linguist Christina is a musician, and she had a program on a computer, and she did the sound, the notes, and how long they go for, if it's low or high or whatever the terminology is. And I know I went and did a lecture at the Music Academy University or some such name like that, and he actually said, well, that symbol means that he's emphasising the first letter in each of those words. So in a song, it's a definite example of that. So one of the songs sings about the duck and the swan and everything like that. So people working together like that can work all those little intricacies out.
So it sounds a bit like a difference in learning style, like in pedagogy, to be more living and practical on a daily basis and through song rather than just necessarily written down.
That just confuses me.
Right. Interesting. Down the back.
Hi, first up, thank you.
Try another one.
Thanks. First up, thanks. I've really appreciated the session. I am also a teacher with just an interest in whether, what particularly, Joel, I guess, with the work that you're doing, what needs to happen to see greater uptake of Victorian Aboriginal languages at the higher ends of the schooling system at year 9, 10, 11 and 12. And then also, Mandy as well, you mentioned usage in a more, very much more everyday kind of family and community context. Is developing languages at the higher end of school a priority, or is that a different kind of usage? Like, how would you see language moving out of schools and into those settings in a better way? I can see those things are connected.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, sure. Look, couple of points in that question. I think with respect to languages within schools, within Gunditj Mara country, and I'm speaking for my community, and they've made the decision that they want it in the schools. There's some communities that might have some sort of provisions where they want to learn it first before they start to share it with the wider community. That's their prerogative. And certainly, I think generally on the whole, most of the communities around the state are supportive of the introduction of language programs within schools. Now, to actually achieve that, obviously we need to increase the pool of local Indigenous speakers of language. And for that to occur, it's the programs that we're running right now at this particular point in time are the ones that need, a big injection of resource to allow us to be able to multiply people with the skills set that certainly I and Mandy and quite a few others who've been working on community language programs have. And then you'll start to see, the numbers of people who can speak fluently and can deliver a language studies program increase exponentially. Obviously, if schools are aware that there are people within the local community that can deliver the language programs that within an approved curriculum framework that are reasonably well resourced and supported and have the protocols all sorted in terms of community support and permission and agreement, then there's no reason why that shouldn't happen immediately. But once again we come across the resources issue where the schools are really struggling to find funds to actually to pay for the teachers to come in and to deliver the programs. And, and this is obviously part of the bigger issue.
So it sounds like there's two things. One is about managing the growth and interest, which is great, but doing it in a sustainable way.
Exactly.
So that you're not burning out and you've got the resources.
Exactly. And the other point about introducing the studies within the community, obviously that's our primary objective, is to get the community to re-embrace language learning, and one of the ways we're doing it is demonstrating the levels and detail of cultural information that's contained within the language around ceremonies, language around bush foods and their uses, and language around the production of cultural objects and all of those sorts of things, which really ring really loud and clear in the ears of traditional owner groups who are constantly trying to revive culture. So when they see the wealth of information that's within the language, they really start to embrace it. But there is a bit of a difficulty in that the older generation still have some stigmas associated with their experiences of being prohibited from learning language and practicing culture. A lot of them are so ingrained with their way of speaking, in terms of speaking English, that it's really difficult for them now, in an elderly age, to actually learn how to make these new sounds, which are totally different to anything in English. And I've had, quite a few elders within our community, express frustration in trying to produce the Indigenous sounds. But on the other end of the spectrum, where we look at the children and the teens and the adults, once they've been exposed to certainly the methodology that we prefer to use in terms of teaching, which is a sort of a culturally sort of appropriate way of teaching language, and it's based on the method described as accelerated second language acquisition. It's about cultural immersion. It's not about sitting down and writing. It's about audio, visual, and musical representations of objects and articulations of language to refer to them. The kids, they love it. We have language lessons set up which are structured around 8 or so words and a bit of grammar associated with it. 15, 20 minutes after doing that lesson, the kids have got it straight away. Awesome. And their pronunciation is spot on. And the same as you go up to the middle-aged groups with the adults, the method is the best way to do it. So we're doing all those sorts of things. We're providing the community with access to printed resources and digital resources, such as with the apps, as well as I've got a website down there in Gunismara country which you can dial up, and it's got a whole raft of daily words that you would use, like hello, goodbye, I live here, my name is, I'm hungry, where is the toilet, I'm thirsty. And you can click on that and bang, you'll hear my voice come out pronouncing the words. So, and you can get it on your mobile phone, so you can dial it up.
So
anywhere.
You can hear Joel anywhere you want.
And you can access it. But I mean, it's about accessibility for the community.
Absolutely.
And in a way where they can actually get real benefit and instruction from that process. So I hope that goes to answer your question.
I think with adding to your comments about community, a really good way to teach community, because my community is geographically dispersed everywhere. So I think just driving generally, you can point out words, the sun, word for the sun, word for the bird that's flying past, and it sinks into I've got my 2 daughters at home and my nephew, and I said to them, excuse me, I do not accept insults in English, you have to use language. So I've taught them how to say, bolado nangadakino, which means you're a big silly person. So even curses, because that's one of the first type of words that you learn. But I think a most important way to get language out there to people, and especially young ones that are disengaged from their organisation or their people, is to do ceremonial practices. We had a coming of age ceremony that hadn't happened since European arrival, and we were hoping about 5 people, young girls, would go through it, but we ended up getting 20. And it was called the Murum Turul Kuruk ceremony, and Murum is body, Turuk is the name for Turak, which means reeds, and Kuruk is female. So it's a female ceremony, but it's for the community, and we did the ceremony itself in front of family members and wider family members. And it's just awesome to see the confidence come out in these girls that haven't had that connection to their culture. And one of the stepmothers wrote me a message, didn't know who she was. She goes, "You don't know me, but my stepdaughter is a beautiful young girl that lacks confidence. But after doing this ceremony, she's got a renewed sense of her Aboriginal identity." And that's why we do it. That's what it's all about.
Beautiful. So it really is the real housewives of Turak. It's the real women of Turak. Last question. I think we've got time for one more. All right. Well, we might discuss this afterwards, but can we please give a huge round of applause to Paul Paton, Mandy Nicholson and Joel Wright.